All right, listeners, ready to ace those regulatory exams? Today, we're diving deep into the Banking Laws Amendment Bill of 2024.
That's right. We're breaking it down so you can focus on what really matters for exam day.
It's like opening your textbook and bam, there's a whole new chapter.
Don't worry, we'll make sure you're prepared.
First up, let's talk about Fortnite.
Fortnite.
Yeah, it might seem basic, but it's key for banks figuring out their cash reserves with the RBI.
Absolutely. The RBI Act and the Banking Regulation Act currently define it as Saturday to the second Friday,
They use that to calculate their average daily balance with the RBI.
which then determines their cash reserve requirement.
Makes sense.
So yeah, it's a big deal.
But hold on, this bill is switching things up.
Oh. Also,
No more Saturday to Friday calculations.
really?
The new definition is going to be either the 1st to the 15th of the month or the 16th to the last day.
That's interesting.
Right.
I wonder how that will impact bank liquidity management.
Yeah, think about it. You're a bank used to managing reserves based on that rolling fortnight.
Now you've got these fixed periods.
Got to adjust those strategies, especially when the market gets a little crazy.
Exactly. And for you exam superstars, this is where the real thinking comes in.
You mean they might actually ask about this on the exam?
Oh, absolutely. They could throw a scenario at you based on this new definition.
So it's not just about memorizing the new dates.
You've got to understand how this impacts the banks, how it changes their operations, how they manage liquidity.
Okay, good to know.
Definitely keep that in mind.
All right, next up, let's talk about bank directors.
Those at the top.
Currently, they have a maximum tenure of 8 years, right?
That's right.
But there's a little twist for cooperative banks in this bill.
Ah, yes. The bill extends their limit to 10 years.
10 years.
Yep.
Interesting. So that's a key difference between commercial and cooperative banks.
Precisely something you'll want to remember for the exam.
Got it. So say you're a hotshot director.
Someone in high demand.
Yeah, and multiple banks want you on their board. Can you be on several boards at the same time?
Generally, no. The Banking Regulation Act puts a stop to that.
No double dipping, huh?
Right. It's all about preventing conflicts of interest
Makes sense.
and ensuring directors can really dedicate their attention to each bank.
But of course there's an exception.
Wouldn't be a rule without one, right?
And I bet it involves our friends, the cooperative banks.
You know it. The bill makes an exception for directors of central cooperative banks,
Okay.
specifically if they're elected to the board of a state cooperative bank where they're already members.
So they can wear two hats in that case.
It acknowledges how connected the cooperative banking structure is.
All right, so for those of you keeping score at home,
Taking notes.
common directorships are generally a no-no,
Right.
but there are some specific exemptions,
Exactly.
especially within the cooperative banking world.
Keep an eye out for those.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Now, let's cackle a term that might sound a bit technical. Substantial interest.
Ah, yes. Crucial under the Banking Regulation Act.
So what does it actually mean?
Currently, it means holding shares worth over 5 lakh rupees,
Okay.
or 10% of a company's paid-up capital, whichever is less.
So if you own a big chunk of a company,
You've got a substantial interest.
but this bill is changing things up.
It is.
Get ready for a higher bar.
The bill is proposing to increase that threshold
How much higher are we talking?
to a whopping 2 crore rupees.
Too cruel.
And get this, the central government can actually adjust that amount even further.
Whoa, okay. That's a big change.
It is.
What do you think this means for the exams?
Well, this could be a sign that regulators are shifting their focus
That who?
to the larger shareholders.
The big fish.
Exactly. They want to keep a closer eye on their influence.
So this is one of those subtle changes that could easily pop up as an exam question.
Oh, absolutely.
They might ask why regulators are suddenly so interested in these larger shareholders.
Right. Or what kind of impact this might have on corporate governance and risk management.
Good point. Got to think beyond just memorizing the new number.
It's about understanding why the motivations behind the change.
All right, let's move on to something that's probably on everyone's mind. Nominations.
Yes. Everyone's got those valuable deposits.
Maybe some family heirlooms tucked away in a safe deposit box.
The question is who gets it all if something happens to you?
Right under the current Banking Regulation Act, you can appoint a nominee.
That's right. For your accounts, your lockers. Any articles you have with the bank?
And this nominee steps in if you're no longer around.
Exactly. They can access those assets.
Makes sense.
Huh?
But the bill is adding a twist here.
A twist.
It's making nominations more flexible.
Oh, how so?
You can now appoint up to 4 nominees.
4.
Yep, for deposits, lockers, safe custody articles, the whole shebang.
Interesting.
Now here's where it gets a little tricky.
All right, I'm listening.
The bill introduces 2 new concepts.
Lay it on me.
successive nomination and simultaneous nomination.
Okay, I'm following so far.
Think of successive like a relay race.
Okay.
If the first nominee can't act, the next one steps in and so on. Got it. And with simultaneous nomination, all nominees have equal rights and can act together.
Interesting. So you've got options now.
You do? For deposits, you can choose either type.
Okay.
But for lockers and those safe custody articles, it's only successive nomination.
So there are some restrictions.
It's all about giving people more control over their assets.
I see.
Imagine a family spread out across the globe.
Right.
Having multiple nominees can really simplify things if something happens.
Especially with successive nomination.
Absolutely.
It avoids potential complications.
This is definitely something that could show up on the exam.
Oh, for sure.
So remember the key difference between successive and simultaneous,
Right.
and which one applies to different assets.
Don't get caught out by the details.
Now let's talk about unclaimed assets.
Yeah.
You know, those forgotten treasures sitting in accounts.
What happens to them?
Right now, the focus is on unclaimed dividends.
Okay.
If they sit in an unpaid dividend account for 7 years,
Yes.
they get transferred to the Investor Education and Protection Fund.
The IEP.
You got it. But this bill is expanding what gets swept into the IEPF.
Interesting. So it's not just dividends anymore.
Nope, they're casting a wider net.
What else are they including?
Well, they're adding in shares that haven't seen any dividend payouts for 7 years,
Okay.
and any interest or redemption amounts on bonds that have gone unclaimed for the same period.
So the IEPF is going to be busy.
It is, and this really highlights how important financial literacy is.
Absolutely, especially for those retail investors.
You got to know how to track your investments,
Yeah.
claim those dividends, understand your rights.
Otherwise, your assets could end up in the IEPF.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Finally, let's talk about the folks who keep a close eye on the banks, the auditors.
Watchdogs.
Right now, the RBI and the central government decide how much they get paid.
Yeah, that's the current system.
But the bill is shaking things up.
In what way?
It's giving banks the power to set the auditor's pay.
That's a big shift.
Right. It's like the student deciding how much to pay the teacher.
Interesting. It raises some questions about auditor independence.
For sure.
Yeah.
Could banks use this power to influence those audits?
Right. Maybe offer bigger fees for favorable reports?
Or threaten to cut them if they uncover something they don't like?
It's a delicate balance.
It is. And as future regulators, you'll be dealing with this kind of stuff all the time.
Absolutely.
So think about it. Could banks handle this responsibility?
Will auditors stay truly independent?
These are the questions you should be asking yourselves as you prep for those exams.
The examiners will want to know you can think critically about these changes.
Exactly. It's not just about knowing the rules, it's about understanding their potential impact.
The why behind the what.
You got it. All right, that's it for part 1 of our deep dive into the Banking Laws Amendment Bill of 2024.
We've covered a lot, but there's still more to come.
Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dig even deeper and give you more strategies for acing those exams.
We'll be back soon with more insights and exam tips. Welcome back, everyone. We're jumping right back into the Banking Laws Amendment Bill of 2024.
That's right, we're not done yet.
There's so much more to cover.
Absolutely, we're here to make sure you're ready to conquer those regulatory exams.
So let's pick up where we left off, shall we?
Let's do it.
We were just discussing that interesting shift in power when it comes to auditor remuneration.
Yeah, giving banks the power to decide how much their auditors get paid.
It could make things more efficient.
Right, they could tailor those fees to how complex the audit is.
Makes sense, ensuring the auditors are compensated fairly.
But then there's that question of independence.
Right. Could banks start throwing their weight around?
Offering big bonuses for good reports or cutting fees if they don't like what they hear.
It's a tough one for sure.
As future regulators, you'll be facing these kinds of dilemmas all the time.
Absolutely.
The examiners might even ask you to analyze this change.
Weigh the pros and cons.
Exactly. Efficiency versus transparency and accountability.
It's all about finding that balance.
Okay, let's switch gears for a moment and go back to nominations.
All right, back to those 4 nominees.
Yeah, the bill allows for up to 4 now for deposits, lockers, safe custody articles.
Remember that.
But what really stuck with me were those 2 new types of nominations.
Successive and simultaneous.
It adds a whole new layer of complexity.
It does. For deposits, you can choose either one.
But for lockers and safe custody articles, it's only successive.
Keep those distinctions in mind.
Absolutely. Let's break it down with an example.
Okay, I'm listening.
Say you have a joint account with your sibling, and you both name your mom as the nominee.
So that would be simultaneous.
Right? You both have equal rights and can act together.
Makes sense.
Now imagine you have a safe deposit box.
Okay.
You name your spouse as the first nominee, and your child as the second.
Ah, so that's excessive.
Exactly. If your
Yeah.
spouse can't act for whatever reason, your child steps in.
That's a good way to explain it.
Now imagine the examiners throw a curveball. Multiple nominees, different types of assets, maybe a nominee living overseas or something,
They'll want to see if you can apply those rules.
and spot those potential issues.
That's the kind of stuff that separates the good regulators from the great ones.
Right. It's not enough to just know the rules.
You've got to be able to apply them to real-life situations.
Okay, now let's go back to that change in the fortnight definition.
Yes, that seemingly small tweak.
But it could have a big impact on bank liquidity management.
Right, it's like they're changing the rhythm.
Banks are used to managing their reserves based on that rolling fortnight.
Now it's fixed monthly periods,
They're going to have to adapt.
especially when things get volatile.
Imagine you're a bank and your whole cash management routine gets thrown out the window.
It could be a real challenge.
And for you aspiring regulators, this is where you get to shine.
Show off those analytical skills.
The examiners might ask you to assess the impact of this change on different banks.
Big banks, small banks, different business models.
They might even ask you to come up with strategies to mitigate any negative impacts.
This is where understanding those reserve requirements and liquidity management tools comes in.
It's about thinking like a regulator, anticipating challenges, finding solutions.
Absolutely.
All right, let's move on to something that's super relevant for future regulators.
What's that?
The expansion of the Investor Education and Protection Fund.
The IEPF.
Yep, we talked about how the bill expands the types of assets that get transferred there.
Right, it's not just unclaimed dividends anymore.
But it's more than just adding a few new asset types.
It raises some interesting questions from a regulatory perspective.
Right, why are all these assets going unclaimed in the first place?
Is it a lack of awareness? Are there systemic issues preventing people from claiming what's rightfully theirs?
These are the kinds of questions regulators need to think about.
They need to ensure the IEPF is actually effective.
And that it's protecting investors.
Exactly.
So for you exam takers, understanding this expansion is key.
It's about going beyond the surface and demonstrating a deep understanding of the issues.
Now, before we wrap up part 2, I want to circle back to that substantial interest threshold.
The one that's being raised to 2 crore rupees.
Right. What does that change really mean? What are the implications?
Well, it could streamline regulatory oversight.
Focus on the big players.
Exactly. If you only own a small piece of the pie, they're not as worried.
But if you're holding a big chunk, they're going to be watching you.
For those prepping for the exams, understanding this rationale is crucial.
They might ask you to analyze the impact on corporate governance, shareholder activism, even market dynamics.
Right. Or what if a shareholder just below that threshold tries to exert undue influence?
How would you handle that as a regulator? What tools would you use?
These are the questions that really test your understanding,
They want to see you can apply your knowledge to those gray areas.
where the rules might not be so clear-cut.
And that's what we're here to help you do.
We're breaking down this bill piece by piece.
Giving you the knowledge and the skills you need to ace those exams.
Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll continue to explore the bill's nuances.
And share even more tips for exam success.
We'll be back soon with more insights and strategies.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the Banking Laws Amendment Bill of 2024.
It's been a journey,
We've covered a lot of ground.
from fortnights to auditors.
Nominations to unclaimed assets.
It's been quite the ride.
But before we wrap things up,
Let's take a moment to reflect.
what's the bigger picture here? What's the main takeaway?
Well, I think this bill is a really interesting example of how regulators are trying to
Trying to what?
balance things
What kind of balance?
between strengthening regulations.
Making things tighter.
Exactly, and adapting to the ever-changing financial landscape,
So they're trying to keep things under control.
especially with those larger players,
But at the same time, they're giving banks more freedom in some areas.
like setting those auditor fees.
It's a tricky balancing act.
It is, and for those of you studying for those regulatory exams,
This is gold.
it's not just about memorizing the changes
You've got to understand why they're making them.
and how they could impact the entire financial system.
So for our future regulators out there, I have a challenge for you.
All right, hit me with it.
Think about all the changes we've talked about today.
Okay.
Which one do you think is the most significant and why?
Ooh, that's a good one.
And what kind of exam question could you see coming from this bill?
There are so many possibilities.
Right. This bill is practically a test maker's dream.
It is, remember, there's no right or wrong answer here.
It's all about showing how you think.
How you analyze things, how you connect the dots,
Exactly. The examiners want to see that you can think critically.
that you understand the why behind the what.
Now, before we sign off,
Let's leave our listeners with something to ponder.
something to think about.
This bill is just a snapshot in time.
Right, regulations are constantly changing.
The financial world never stands still.
So what advice would you give to those who dream of becoming banking regulators?
I'd say never stop learning.
The financial world is constantly evolving.
New challenges, new innovations,
Stay curious, stay informed.
and be ready to adapt.
Excellent advice. And remember, becoming a regulator, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Stay focused, stay persistent.
Don't give up on your goals.
We're here to support you every step of the way.
That's right. Don't forget to subscribe to The Deep Dive.
For more deep dives into the world of finance and regulation,
We'll break down those complex topics
give you strategies for those exams.
and keep you updated on all the latest developments.
So hit that like button
Share this episode with your fellow aspiring regulators.
and let us know what you think in the comments.
Until next time, happy studying and best of luck on your journey to becoming a regulator